welcome to another show. Today I'm going to start with a more political video rather than a film video. I'm going to have to try and be really careful about this because people have very extreme views in politics at the moment, and it makes you have to tread lightly, even though you really shouldn't have to. It's just tricky. So I'm going to try and make my point, try and be as decent as possible. But it's always been bugging me for a while, but it's bugged me enough now I'm commenting on it. Is the idea is just the way we communicate with each other. And why certain social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook and stuff, I try and stay off of, unless I'm promoting these videos, or I'm commenting here or there once in a while to using something silly like a film comment or something. I tend to stay away from political stuff. Even though I've got my own political views, I try to stay away from that because, to be honest, it's not really worth it because you see a lot of stupidity, really. And it's kind of stupidity you see in daily life as well, but it's much more in your face on like Twitter because people tend to think it's an obvious comment that people made it for years now. People, because they've got, it's just typewriter warriors basically. You don't have to face up to the person you're attacking, so you can say whatever you want, and you're going to be hyperbolic about it. And it's a mechanism that creates this disorder within humanity, that something that's already a problem in day-to-day life is how, essentially, as human beings, one of the big deflection points if we get into any problems with each other is to deflect the validity of other people's points of view by intentionally mischaracterizing them. Or, say, if there's a problem, if there's something that you do not know that much about, be hyperbolic about something, try and move the conversation to something else you feel a bit more confident about, be hyperbolic, attack an original view from that perspective rather than being like, okay, I don't know that much about this one, so I'll avoid it. You know, we tend to take one little thread of something we disagree with the original post with, and to say, okay, I'm going to avoid actually covering this. I'm going to cover something else. It's a hyperbolic thing, and it means you're not actually discussing the original point or admitting to yourself what the original point actually was. Because none of us are experts on lots of things. A lot of us are. You've got areas where you know a lot, and there's areas where you know a little, and there's other areas where you know something, but you know you've got gaps in knowledge. And people trying to cover this by not being most honest with themselves or with other people, really. And it creates this battlefield where you don't even really talk anymore to people because it's something that happens in daily life as well. I mean, face-to-face people do this too, and it makes you not want to have conversations with them because they're not really trying to engage the problem, they're just trying to protect themselves, and that becomes very boring. And now we go to Twitter, it's become much worse. And every day you see someone explode over something or other, which they don't actually know that much about. And it's almost like they're trying to be on the right side of history a lot of the time. Which is ironic because there are millions of people on Twitter and social media. No one's going to remember who you are. No one knows who you are. No one knows who this podcast is. I mean, I only get very small viewerships anyway. It's more for me than anything. But no one knows who you are if you're on Twitter. No one cares. Really. Because everyone knows it's bollocks, basically. But it's they can disengage with that kind of sense of people will not actually engage with the complexity of an issue, which is the thing that bothers me. Because when I'm going online, I want to find out information I don't know about. Like, I'm the kind of person that even though I'm politically to the left, I will read people from the right to see what they're thinking so that I know what they're thinking even though I disagree with them. Because I want to know the thought process of people I don't agree with, and I'm going to find out where I think they've gone wrong, or where I think there's a problem, or where they've got something half right, or where they're right and where my opinions might be a bit off. Or, more usually, the situation's really complicated and there's no one solution. So I read people from my side of the argument, I read people from the other side of the argument, I try and find my own view of the subject. And usually my view of the subject becomes, it's really complicated. And there's not one issue, there's not one specific thing you see that's the dominant issue. Because if you look at any development of any issue, it changes all the time. One thing becomes dominant, then another thing becomes dominant, then another thing becomes dominant. And the reality is the issue is so multi-layered in the first place that if you just start talking about the layers of the argument and behaving like adults, you'd get a lot further on. But no one will do that because everyone wants to be right, everyone wants to be proven right in public. And it's like, no, that's not what grown-ups should be doing. And people tend to be happy to not know anything about a subject and act as if they're an expert. You know. But I said, I've seen this in real life too. People seem to think this social phenomena of people like being disingenuous is something new because of social media. It's not. People do this face to face in any organisation since the beginning of time. You know, it tends to be like organisations slowly build up, and the people who are good at being political tend to get ahead in any organisation. That's just the way it is. And a lot of the time, they're not going to let the full complexity of a situation become apparent because they want their point of view to be dominant. So what I've seen on Twitter is not... It's been enhanced by technology and it's been used by certain people, but it's something that happens all the time. If you look at any political organisation, whether left wing or right wing, they grow because they kind of hyperbolize their point of view, and it dominates through the society slowly. Sometimes there's a reaction against like a left wing uprising from a right wing dictatorship before will evolve. You know, that kind of thing. Sometimes there's a reaction, but then it becomes so insular to our side is the best side, rather than looking at okay, what the flaws of that lot we get rid of, and what did it do was actually good and cohesive, and how do we change it to make it work for our ideals? No, it's like it becomes sort of something much more out of control. It's just the human nature. We hyperbolize everything. You know, we always want to trash what's come before for our own egos, as if we're right because we have emotions. It's just an emotional thing. It's nothing else. Anytime you go on Twitter, you're just seeing people's emotions. And it's because it gets wearying after a while. It gets wearying how, like, there can be so much talking on any issue and not much sense is made of it. It just jumps from one extreme to the other, to another. So we see something that was acceptable 10 years ago that isn't now, and it's like, 10 years you said this and you should be cancelled. And it's like, no. That was where the title was then. You know, and it becomes this thing of cancelling people, which, by the way, the left are doing a lot now, but the right have been doing it for centuries. Anybody who wasn't the conservative point of view never got a platform in the first place through centuries. I mean, look at any gay people. They were legally banned from society for centuries. And some countries are still being, criminalised. So it's been... The rights like to think, so to say, oh, is this a new left-wing phenomenon? No, they're taking it from you. You lot did it first. And the left do it pretty badly. If you look at the most extreme version is communism, where you have to follow a certain set of rules. But it's always been in there for a while. It's been one of those things that's always been there in humanity, in society, that we've got a problem with communication. It's the way we communicate, the way we think is so ego-driven. Of course, the other extreme is some people become so demoralised they won't say a word. And they may have some valid points. So that's another problem we have, is like some people you really want to talk won't talk. But it's like extremes that people become either I have nothing to say or I've everything to say, and this is really important. It becomes a society based on how can we exploit this? Like, who can we exploit the loudest people to get ourselves across, or how do we exploit something politically to get our point of view across? And just human communication becomes something that's devalued, and something we've been doing for centuries, which is devalue communication. So now, because technology has become much more easy to find, we think everything we interact on now is a new thing. No, all this stuff happened before, but it might have been entrenched within certain ideologies. We had to be careful what you said. But this is all from humanity. This is all our instincts. We've now have freer societies so we can say stuff, but a lot of times stuff we're going to say is stupid, and we haven't got beyond the point of, okay, we can say what we want, but is it useful? And do we have the self-knowledge to say this is useful? And do we have the discipline to say, you're being childish, shut up? Because that's what a lot of people on Twitter are like, just shut up, you're being childish. And we've all have moments of that. You know, we've all said things that have been stupid. Everybody. So, that's the kind of thing that bugging me. It's just our sense of, I'm not sure you can explain this right, it's our sense of communication through society just seems to be not based on logic, it's not based on reading. The idea of books was to have knowledge written down so we could study them and actually learn from our mistakes. And nowadays, books tend to be what gibberish being used to sell things. You know, the books are respected are the ones that are the best sellers, even though they're actually saying nothing because no one wants to actually go deep into a subject because it's complicated. So it's become a capitalist system of making people feel that they're happy, making people feel empowered. Well, they're just sitting at home doing nothing. You know, it's that kind of thing. But that makes it easier for capitalism to keep going. And I mean, the same way in a communist country, it's like fall into the trap of being loyal to your state, and that's all that's important, and you're not important. So I mean, it's two extremes of the same thing. Humanity just likes the extreme. We have a weakness for the extreme, and we have an aversion for actual communication. So you keep on saying stuff you know is not true, you know. And it gets frustrating when you feel like anything comes up, and because you have to use it to sell papers and sell websites and stuff, the hyperbolized clickbait becomes an important thing rather than actual conversation. And we're so consistently bad at this, you know, this sense of we're going to use our communication not to talk. A recent example, and this is not something I agree or disagree with anybody on, right? It's a Joe Rogan thing, right? It's just come up, and in about 3 weeks, this thing will be unimportant to anybody because it's just a up thing. Neil Young took his music off Spotify, and so did a couple of other old hippies who are almost dead to reject the idea that Joe Rogan, because they said Joe Rogan was spreading misinformation because he was talking to people who were outside the mainstream about COVID. And it became, well, so what? That's what you're meant to be doing. And it became this big thing like, oh my god, Joe Rogan's a right-wing lunatic. He's had for years. Now, anyone's actually listened to his show, I've listened to some of the shows. Some of the guests I don't like, some of the guests I like. He talks to some right-wingers, some left-wingers. It's a centrist show. It really is. It's been characterised by a right-wing show because some right-wing loonies that you might go to defend it, but he has people like Kyle Kalinske on. He has people like Jimmy Dore on who are lefties. He has lots of people who are lefties, and a lot of the stuff he says are quite left. But he talks to some right-wingers too. He tries to balance it out. And any time now he's become like, oh, he's the voice of the right. To some people, you think, well, you've never actually watched this show, or you might watch one episode of someone who you don't like, and it's like, it's that hyperbolized thing in a nutshell. When it's like suddenly you're seeing things like he's obviously a Joe Rogan viewer, so he must be a lunatic. You're thinking, no, just get educated. And it's that thing you get, and it's that kind of hyperbolized. You're either this side or you're this side. There's no nuance. And the thing is, that show is all about yapping about stuff and getting stuff wrong sometimes, and communication. And that's what podcasts have been evolving into. It's been an outpouring of stuff that you can look at Matt Maron's show that talks to these people about the problems they've had in their lives. There's lots of podcasts out there, and I've only said podcasts since about 2008 or something, because I liked the long form stuff they had, because I get really, really, really tired of this sort of short news thing, because a lot of stuff to me in news, I'm going to wait a couple of weeks before I have an opinion on anything, because I know I'm just going to get this short bites of stuff that don't feel correct. And you get all this stuff now about the COVID, like what do you do with COVID? It's really complicated how you deal with a crisis like this. It's really complicated, and people are going to get things wrong. And it's the same thing that happened with Brexit a while ago, and like, you're not allowed to have complicated opinions about it. Like, I have elderly parents who I'm trying to make sure are safe. I have anxiety. I am the most medical folk person. I barely go out. Right. But also, I don't think the government have been competent in the least how they handled it. I'm pretty sure there's been lots of big pharma stuff that's a bit dodgy, because big pharma's always a bit dodgy, and the government contract systems have always been a bit dodgy. And it doesn't matter which government it is, because, I mean, if you look at America, as a British lefty, it's hard to think that America doesn't have, like, two right-wing parties. Even though in Britain you feel that you've got the Labour or the Tories. Tories are right-wing. Labour goes from being extreme left-wing to being kind of centrist, a bit dodgy. And even they've their own little schizo thing going on. And you feel that there's no one actually representing people. And that's why there's a lot of frustration coming on. Like, there's a lot of like working class revolts against government, and a lot of time they're saying, oh, they're all right-wing fascists. Like, these are working class people. No, it's complicated. There's things going on. And and a lot of times things aren't even covered. But I'm going off rambling. That's the reason why I don't take straight the first thing I see. Which doesn't mean I think it's all a conspiracy, because I don't. I think usually you'll find, if you look into anything, there's a valid concern from some people with something, and certain people take it to extreme, and the more normal people in any group tend to be drowned out by the lunatics. Which is why I'm very careful about when I'm watching stuff, to actually like leave it a bit and try and read into things carefully. See, okay, who are the actual people who are logical at this, and what's the actual points, and what's the hyperbolic points that are obscuring everything. So that's why I think it's very, very dangerous to be a Twitter warrior, because you're going to look pretty stupid pretty quickly, you know. And if you actually view your politics about saying I'm with this person, I'm not with this person, it's going to look bad in a couple of years, because everybody makes mistakes and everybody's going to. The thing's going to change, and you know, you just have to be careful about the craziness in society, because it's always going to be there. There's no such thing as a logical element of society or a logical time. Usually it is. Sometimes people are more locked down so they can't express themselves. But you see the craziness in the politics or in the governments. I mean, any government are always full of crazy folks. Look at any US president in the last 4 or 5 years in the power. I mean, even Obama had lots of weird stuff going on behind the scenes. Look at Britain in the last 2 decades. I mean, it's been like a parade of craziness. And then you go down and stuff, and any concern becomes hyperbolized pretty quickly, and anybody disagrees with you is wrong or is evil or something. It's like, you have to be very, very careful and try and avoid crazy. It's very difficult and it's very exhausting because you end up feeling like, I don't want to keep going through all this garbage when I'm trying to read the news. You know, because I also don't want to be a crazy person who's conspiracy theory, because even like if you're online, you tend to spot people who seem interested, and then as you get into it, you realise that they're crazy. They're genuinely crazy, so I'll avoid them. Everyone does that. And I think you just have to be really careful, because there's just people are crazy, and people like to think they're important, and people don't like to take the due diligence. And the thing is, all this stuff you see online, I've experienced in real life too. If you're in any business or any group trying to build something, you get that kind of craziness and avoidance of facts to suit yourself. So if you've any experience, you see what's going on now online is just being an extension of human beings. And it's just like, we have to do better. We have to try and stop our more egotistical instincts. So that's basically what it's about. You know, you can like or dislike whoever you like. Just try and not name drop and try not jump into stuff half-cocked and just try and think your way through it. And realise people are more nuanced than you think. And you just have to be kind of very careful to develop. And that's one of the reasons why in older generations the young would be like ignored a bit more, because they're so open to hyperbolic sensations. You know, even though it's a human trait, everybody has it. But people who are young tend to have it a lot more because they're trying to change the world, and that's good, but it also can lead to crazy. You know, and you know, it's one of those things where you just have to be very careful. You have to read a lot and get a lot of context, and don't think you know everything straight away because you've read about 3 books about the subject. No, it takes a long time to know anything about anything, because you have to cut through a lot of the hyperbolic nonsense that goes through history and see like whatever movement, even if you're passionately into it, it's going to have its flaws. And even people you think are enemies and legitimately have views that you know are problems, they may have some good ideas amidst those bad ideas. And you may have to talk to them to try and get them out of the bad ideas, rather than just yell at them and call them this or that. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort to actually be civilised with people, and that's really my point of the video, is try to be civilised with people, not try and fall into the more craven instincts and more egotistical, I'm better than everybody instincts, because no one cares. Collectively, we all have to do a bit better and try and be logical and be sane. So I'm doing this because it's been driving me nuts the last couple of weeks, just watching all this stuff going on. Although it's been really months and months and months. I try to avoid these political videos, because I know no one cares. People are watching this channel for the movie stuff, not this. But once in a while I feel like making one of these videos, because the world is kind of crazy, and the world just seems to be people trying to put spotlight on themselves by being hyperbolic, and I think that's just a trait you really have to resist. You really have to try and be more about depth rather than about, hey, look at me. Anyway, that's me. I'm going to stop now. I hope you enjoyed this rambling. I hope it made sense. You know, whatever the controversy is over the next few months, because it's going to be different from what I've just mentioned, try and apply what I'm just generally saying. Just try and be calm and read into it before you see anything. Okay, that's me for now. I'm back to some more actual movie video stuff. Bye.